So back. So the angels who don't procreate then were created all at one time, and they apparently had the ability to choose to rebel against the purpose for their creation and their role of authority as being under God and servants, not only of God, but servants for the elect people that he would create with Adam upon the earth. And we don't know when the rebellion took place. We don't know a lot about the dynamics of it, but we know that obviously they were defeated, and they're kept in chains. So again, we have, out of the whole group of people, of angels in this case, there was, I think from what Scripture says, about a third of them who fell or rebelled, followed after Satan or Lucifer, who also was an angel, and in the rebellion. And the Gospels in Matthew, Jesus tells us that he was a sinner from the beginning. Satan was a sinner from the beginning. He's the father of lies, and he has always been a liar. So we know that he was created perfect, but from that beginning of his creation chose to be in rebellion to the role that he had been created for by God. And then he goes to another example, and that is Sodom and Gomorrah. And for them, he uses the creation aspect that we are created man and woman, male and female, and we were to be fruitful and multiply. And there was to be this covenant relationship between men and women that brought about families, that brought about more covenant relationships and more families, and multiply and fill the earth, and were priests unto God to worship him. Of course, we know that sin brought an end to that plan. But it says here that just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desires, serve as an example by undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. So the Gentiles of Sodom and Gomorrah, the people rebelled against the boundaries of natural human creation by God. God created all life on earth, and he created man in his image and likeness. And he had boundaries and roles for man in that creation, for mankind, for men and for women. And the sexual relationship within that covenant relationship they had before God together, that was to bring about the family, a covenant family. And the boundary of that sexual relationship between a man and a woman, not between any other form of sexual expression that would be in the hearts or minds of men. They disobeyed that boundary, that natural boundary created there. And as a result, God judged them, and that's the whole story with Lot and his wife, and fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah. So we have three examples. We have an example of the elect people of God who, because of unbelief, even though they were considered part of the whole, their unbelief from the very beginning, not something like I believed and then later choose not to believe, but they entered into that place with God with unbelief in their heart. And that unbelief led them to continually rebel against God. And then we have angels who chose to rebel against God and left their position of authority, the boundaries that God had set them in and placed over them with their authority and the strength and the power they have as supernatural beings. And then again, we have the general picture of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is just dealing with people, humanity, as an example of their rebellion against God. So we have these three very, very dramatic examples, And we know that unbelief, faith, leads to disobedience, and that disobedience becomes a rebellion against God. And it says then in verse 8, yet in like manner these people also, relying on their dreams, defile the flesh, reject authority, and blaspheme the glorious ones. We are going to be able to understand those who have crept in the church from the example of these three people. We can understand what is going on here and how we are to contend for the faith against these. And we're going to look a little more at that on Friday, but what I want to leave us with today is back in that story about Israel in the wilderness and the 12 spies, there were 2 spies that did believe and did stand up for God at threat to their own life from the people of God. And Moses stood with them and declared what was truth. They said, enter in, God will give them to us. It doesn't matter how big they are, how strong. This is a good land filled with milk and honey, and God will give it to us. Well, the people rebelled, even threatened to kill the messenger, and God intervenes, and all the people who through unbelief rebelled perished. But Joshua and Caleb, who stood with God, entered the promised land. The next generation after those 20 years and under, 40 years later, entered. But Joshua and Caleb were, at that time, older than everybody in the whole nation of Israel. The only 2 whole people, it would seem, were able to enter because of faith. That's encouraging for you and I. It doesn't matter what the barrier is or what the fear might be about what is happening in our lives or around us, or what the threat is to life for us. Faith in God prevails. God is able to take his children and bring them through the flood. He is able to take his children and bring them through the fire. In Nebuchadnezzar's day, when Israel was there, the Hebrew men who were thrown into that fire had faith in God and would not bow down to the statue. And God kept them, and they prevailed. God is able to help you and I. And so we should never become fearful of what's going on in the world around us, whether it's some kind of disease or biological or virus or whatever, whether it is the upheaval of politics, the crashing of economic systems, or even the disasters that might happen through climate change. Our faith in God does not have to be disturbed or shook or unsettled by any of these things, because God will see us through all of it. So we can contend for the faith that has been delivered to us. So we'll see you on Friday morning as we go back and look at how these 3 examples point out to us what these certain people that have crept in are like. Hope you have a good day. Bye.